After the Russian Revolution, we will be discussing today the First World War. First World War. And this First World War, we will be focusing upon the various causes which are responsible for this First World War. Then we will discuss about as to how this war started with the attack of Austria upon the Serbia. What was the course of this war? Okay. After that, we will be discussing about the Paris Peace Conference, the Treaty of Versailles, and all those treaties, and how those treaties were responsible for the Second World War. Then we will be dealing with the consequences of this First World War. With that, we will end this First World War, and about the consequences, we will take separately its social consequences, economic consequences, and the political consequences. Okay, so let's begin by stating that this First World War, as you all know, it started in 1914 and it continued up to 1918. Okay. This First World War is also known as the Global War or the Total War, since it involved almost every country of the world directly or indirectly. No doubt, this First World War or the Global War, it was primarily fought in Europe. It was primarily fought on the European continent, but it got gradually involved various other countries as well, which belong to the other continents. Okay, every country of the world was directly or indirectly involved in this war, in this First World War, right? Now, there were two groups. There were two kinds of alliances which fought this war against one another. Okay, so this war was fought between two groups. Okay, one group is known as the Allied Powers. Okay, sometimes they are referred to as the Entente Powers as well. Okay, Allied Powers were on the one side, and the Central Powers, they were on the other side. Central Powers are the Axis powers. They are known as Central Powers because these countries were located on the central part of the European continent. Okay. Allied Powers, the major countries which were the part of this group, they were France, United Kingdom, Italy, Russia, and USA. USA entered into the First World War in 1917, Italy in 1915, and these countries were in the war from the very beginning. Okay. So, on the other side, the Central Powers, they were represented by most prominent power, Germany. Okay, Germany, then Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and Ottoman Empire, Turkey, and various other countries, their associates, their allies were also there with these powers. So this was the First World War. On the one side, this group was fighting against this another group. Alright. So this first World War, for every war there is a cause. So we'll be first of all discussing about the causes which are responsible for this First World War, right? So we will discuss the various causes which are important from your examinations point of view. So we'll be discussing those causes one by one in order to have the complete understanding of this First World War. Now, what were those causes? Those causes which led to this First World War, they lay dormant in the preceding generation, in the preceding century. Okay, so the first important cause behind this First World War, you can say that was a force of nationalism. or you can say the aggressive nationalism. This nationalism was not the soft nationalism, it was the aggressive nationalism. Now this nationalism had its birth in the Europe since the French Revolution of 1789. Nationalism is okay with every country, nationalism is good for the country, but when this nationalism becomes aggressive, it tries to have the supremacy of the nation over the other nations. This aggressive nationalism, it leads to the arrogance of a nation vis-a-vis the other nations. So this aggressive nationalism, in which one country was trying to have its supremacy over the other nations, in which one country was trying to have more arms and ammunitions in comparison to the other nations. That is what this aggressive nationalism is all about. Okay, so this nationalism, which had its origin in the French Revolution, it was further strengthened by the various crises. You already have studied about the unification of Italy, how the nationalism spreaded and was promoted in the Italy when that was unified. Then how Bismarck unified the Germany, how the nationalism got promoted in the Germany as well. So those, you know, those things, then France and the issue of Alsace-Lorraine, how that issue promoted the idea of nationalism. So when you know, those crises were there, the European countries were already in conflict with one another since long times. You already know the wars of Napoleon, you already know the wars of Bismarck, you already know the wars of Cavour in Italy. You already know that what kind of phase was there through which the Europe was going on since 1815, when the Paris Peace Conference, you know, when this Vienna Congress was held in 1815. So all those crises and situations, they now created a kind of arrogance among the people, among the nations, and every nation was now trying to have its supremacy over the other nation. That is how this aggressive nationalism is one basic cause behind this First World War. If nationalism would not have been there, so there would not have been the cause at all, because everybody wanted to see its country as a supreme country in comparison to the other countries. That's how this force of nationalism is one important cause behind this First World War. Now the second important cause behind this First World War, that is the secret diplomatic alliances, secret treaties. You can say secret diplomatic alliances. Okay. The most unfortunate thing about these diplomatic treaties, diplomatic alliances, was that they were secret. They were kept secret. They were not disclosed to the media, to the press, which resulted in the growth of fear, suspicion. Okay, it created a kind of fear and suspicion among the nations. That you know, why these secret diplomatic alliances are being created. For example, there was a triple alliance. One such diplomatic alliance was what is known as the triple alliance. Triple alliance between Germany, Austria, and Italy was one such alliance, was one such secret diplomatic alliance. On the other hand, there was one other alliance which is known as a dual alliance. It was a dual alliance between Russia and France. Okay. Similarly, there were various other kinds of alliances and diplomatic treaties which were kept secret. And these diplomatic alliances, as I told you, they created suspicion and fear among the people, among the nations. Now, what kind of treaty is this? What kind of diplomatic alliance is this? Is this a military alliance? Is this meant to fight against us? So this was kind of a fear and suspicion which was there, which led to this, which created the situation favorable for this First World War. Then you can write down the third important cause behind this First World War. You can write down that cause as the military race for armaments. Okay. militarism, okay, militarism or the armament race. Armament race. Every country was spending a huge budget upon the army, upon the navy, upon the defense. Okay. Germany tried to reform its navy because it wanted its navy as supreme as was the case with England. So England and Germany was already there in conflict, and they wanted to have the uniform kind of navy. You know, Germany, England is always remembered for its naval strength, for its naval power. So Germany also wanted to have its naval power. So this was the kind of competition, military competition, which was going on. Okay, Russia was expanding its army up to a very large extent. France also made a policy by which it stated that every person living in the France had to go compulsory military training of 3 years. Such was the policy made by this France during those days. Similarly, Germany was also there, as I told you. So such kind of military race, armaments race, in which every country wanted to have more and more arms and ammunitions, more and more tanks, more and more bombs. Okay, so such kind of such kind of competition gave rise to this First World War. All right. Then the fourth important cause you can write down as the imperialism oblique economic competition. Okay. So the beginning of the 20th century, the time of this 20th century, it was such a time when the world powers were regarded only those powers who don't have the only standing in Europe, but they must possess a huge colonies. So that era, that age, the beginning of 20th century was marked by the ideology of imperialism. Imperialism, you all know that it means the subjugation of a smaller country, weaker country by a stronger country. So every country of the Europe, they tried to have the more and more colonies. They tried to have the more and more, non-European possessions. By following this policy of imperialism, they were trying to have more and more colonies because they knew the importance of colonies. They knew that they could get the raw materials from the colonies. They could get the markets for the finished products, which they were producing, which their industries were not producing. Okay, so they fought for their colonies. They fought for more and more colonies. You know about India. What happened in the form of Carnatic Wars? How France and England struggled in India, and France wanted to have the colonies in India. Not how they fought against each other and how English became successful in those Carnatic Wars eventually. So what I'm trying to say, through this imperialism and through this competition, Germany was lagging behind. Germany was now watching that how its neighbors like France and England are having the more and more colonies, and I don't have any kind of such colony. In fact, I have the minimum colonies only. So such kind of thinking on the part of Germany, that I want more and more colonies, it led to this kind of competition, and that competition in turn created a chaos resulting into this First World War. So it is what is known as this imperialism and this economic competition. You can write down the point in this way in your exams. Then another important cause behind this First World War is the character of Emperor William Kaiser. So this Emperor William Kaiser was the emperor of Germany at that time. If he would have wanted, probably the war could have been avoided. But he was a very short-tempered person of Germany. He was a very short-tempered person. He wanted to have the more colonies for him. He wanted to pursue an aggressive foreign policy. He wanted to have a stronger army for his country. He wanted to have, he wanted to keep his country supreme in the Europe. Okay, so that character of this William Kaiser, his short-tempered nature was responsible for this war. When I will tell you about the immediate cause, that how this William Kaiser supported Austria when Austria attacked Serbia. So that his character is equally responsible for this First World War. He gave the spark. He gave the spark to this First World War, this William Kaiser. Alright? Then another cause is what is known as the uncontrolled nature of press. The press, the printing press, the journals, the newspapers and the magazines, they were openly propagating this war ideology. They were making the propaganda against one country, against another country. So the press of England, it was continuously propagating, it was making propaganda against Germany, against France. Okay, the press of Austria, it was making propaganda against Serbia. The press of Russia was, the articles, the opinions, the news cuttings, they were highlighted in such a way which created a kind of anger among the people. So this uncontrolled nature of press, you can state that it is equally responsible, it is also responsible as an important cause behind this First World War. Okay, then another cause, you can see that the Balkan issue, Balkan crisis. Balkan crisis. Okay, this is the peninsula. Balkan Peninsula is a peninsula in the Mediterranean. So the Balkan countries are the countries which at that time were under Ottoman Empire. Okay, the countries like Albania, Bulgaria, Greece. Okay, so those countries were controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Now, what these Balkan nations in the Balkan Peninsula, what those Balkan countries did, they revolted against the Ottoman Empire and they got the freedom, they got the independence. Now, after getting the independence, those Balkan nations like Bulgaria, Greece and Albania, they fought against one another. Okay, the population was heterogeneous. Now a country, now a person who was speaking the Bulgarian language, he was now forcibly attached to some other part of the world, so some other country like Greece. So that kind of tension, the Balkan crisis. Okay, Balkan crisis from 1912 up to 1914, in which not a single European power tried to solve these issues, this crisis. So this Balkan crisis is also an important factor behind this First World War. It created a kind of tension, it created a kind of anarchy in the Balkan Peninsula, which resulted into this First World War. Alright, so you can go on, you can write down few other important causes as well. For example, there is one important cause which is in the form of this absence of any international organization. Okay, you can say that the absence of any international organization. Nowadays you have United Nations organization. Okay, so then after First World War, the League of Nations came into existence. But before the First World War, there was not any kind of such international organization which could have possibly prevented the war. Okay, we could have hoped possibly that the war could have been prevented if there would have been any international organization, but the case was not like that. The absence of international organization can be stated as one more subsidiary cause behind this First World War, right? How many causes you wrote down there? Eight. Okay. Now, let me discuss one more cause, and I will put that cause into this into this category, immediate cause. What was the immediate cause of this behind this First World War, which gave the spark to this accumulated stock of grievances, to this accumulated stock of crises which were already there going on since the generations. Okay, so you all know that the immediate cause of the war became the tension between the Austria and Serbia. Okay, Austria and Serbia were already in the tense situations. They were already in hostilities with one another. Okay, they were in conflict with one another, and now the Austrian prince, okay, Archduke Ferdinand, he plans to visit. He plans to visit to the Serbia, to the Bosnia, right? Now, what happens when he visits Bosnia? There was already a tension in the Bosnia going on. Again, there was already a propaganda. There were very secret revolutionary organizations which were fighting against the Austria, and now they planned the murder of this Archduke Ferdinand. When he entered into Bosnia, into Serbia on 28th of June, perhaps 1914. So he was there murdered by that revolutionary society. The person involved was the Princip, that James Princip, right? So he was murdered, right? He was killed. When he was murdered, so automatically the wave of anger, the wave of frustration, it occurred in the Austria. Now the Austria stated that Austrian openly blamed the Serbia behind, Serbia for this murder. Okay, because it was revealed later on that those revolutionaries, they were supplied arms and ammunitions by the Serbian authorities, by the Bosnian authorities. Okay, so that's how this First World War occurred. Then the foreign minister of Austria openly challenged this Serbia, openly claimed that I will be going for the war against Serbia. Okay, in the meanwhile, he got support from the Germany. He signed an agreement with the Germany, and Germany openly stated that I will support Austria in this war against Bosnia, against Serbia. And that support by the Germany is stated to be the blank check given to the Austria. And when Austria gives ultimatum to the Serbia that accept my ultimatum within 48 hours, otherwise I will attack you. Bosnia accepts every condition given in that ultimatum except few which were going against its sovereignty. So Bosnian attitude was a kind of humble attitude, and Bosnia tried to prevent the war. But Austria was adamant of having the war against Bosnia. That's how after that ultimatum, this Austria declared war upon Serbia, and Austria was supported by Germany. On the other hand, Bosnia was supported by Russia. Russia came to support Serbia, Germany came to support Austria, and slowly and gradually every other country came into support, to one alliance or the other alliance. And that's how this First World War occurred. Okay, so this First World War went on. It went on, and gradually Italy it participated in 1915. Then USA also, when the USA claimed that I will be neutral, I will not be involved in the war, but gradually that was also forced to get involved into this First World War when her some ships were sunk carrying 1,200 passengers. They were sunk by the German forces. Okay, the USA ship called Lusitania at that time, or the Sussex was another ship which was sunk by the German army. Then how Germany was anticipating that the USA will get involved, USA will participate in the war. Germany tried to provoke Mexico against the USA by sending the telegram. You might have heard the name Zimmermann Plan, right? Zimmermann Plan. So this was a telegram which was encoded by the UK, perhaps by the UK. This telegram was sent by the Germany to the Mexico that you should start a war against the USA. And when it was revealed to the US public, so US public openly now supported their president Woodrow Wilson to declare war upon the Germany. That's how these causes, these causes, created a situation which attracted the USA to this into this war in 1917. So USA got involved in the war when Russia withdrew from the war by signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Russia was already having its own kind of revolution, that is known as the Russian Revolution of 1917. So that created a scene for the Russia which forced Russia to withdraw from the war, which he did by signing the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. And what I'm trying to say is that this is how this First World War began, and it went on, and millions of people died, millions of people got wounded, and this was the disaster of such a war. So ultimately, finally, in 1919 or the end of 1918, this war came to an end. Okay, so it formally came to an end by virtue of the Paris Peace Conference. What was this Paris? What is this Paris Peace Conference? So we will deal that thing in a detailed manner in a separate. Before we can take up the various consequences of this First World War, we have to discuss few more aspects which are associated with this First World War, which are important for your exams and which are important for your proper understanding regarding this topic, First World War. So first of all, we will be studying about the Paris Peace Conference. Paris Peace Conference, right? This First World War, it finally came to an end, it formally came to an end with the signing of the various treaties which were signed at Paris. Okay, so this Paris Peace Conference was convened in order to sign the various treaties between the Allied powers, between the victorious powers and between the defeated powers. So you can say that at this Paris Peace Conference, the victorious powers now tried to impose their treaties upon the defeated powers in such a way which benefited the victorious powers and which created the huge losses for the defeated powers. This Paris Peace Conference was mainly represented by the President of USA. It was mainly represented by the Great Britain, mainly represented by the France and the Italy. Okay, Italy, France, United Kingdom and USA made the decisions in this Paris Peace Conference. After the Italy left, because Italy had some differences with the USA, it were the main three, they are known as Big Three. Big Three, Big Three, Woodrow Wilson of this USA, then you have the Clemenceau of France and other, perhaps the Orlando representing the UK. So these three powers were there who made the decisions at this Paris Peace Conference. Now what I'm trying to say, this Paris Peace Conference which was convened in 1919, so various treaties were signed, as I told you. Now the most important treaty among those treaties, it was a Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles is important. It's important for your exams. Treaty of Versailles 1919, it was signed with Germany. Okay, separate treaties were signed with the defeated powers. Okay, with the defeated power. Treaty of Versailles was signed by the Allied powers with the Germany. Then you have one more treaty that is known as Treaty of Saint-Germain. Treaty of Saint-Germain, it was also signed in 1919. It was signed with Austria. Okay. Treaty of Trianon. It was signed with Hungary. Alright. Then you have Treaty of Sevres. Treaty of Sevres was signed with Turkey. Then you have the last one, Treaty of Nili. Yeah, थोड़ा बहुत information याद रखेंगे. Treaty of Nili, it was signed with Bulgaria. Among all these treaties, the most important treaty is the Treaty of Versailles, which you have to understand, which you have to study in depth. Okay. Now, first of all, we will take this Treaty of Versailles, and regarding these other treaties, we will briefly give you some information. And about this Treaty of Versailles, it needs to be properly understood, because this Treaty of Versailles is often responsible for the Second World War, because it was, as I told you, this treaty was a dictated treaty. It was the one-sided treaty. It was the the considerations of Germany were not taken into proper understanding. It was a dictated peace. It was given to the Germany, and Germany had no option other than to accept it, other than to sign it. Okay, so that's how this Treaty of Versailles, it contained the seeds of the future Second World War. Now, what does this Treaty of Versailles means? I mean, Treaty of Versailles Treaty of Versailles, it had the various provisions for the Germany. For example, Germany had to accept the war guilt. Germany accepted the war guilt. It accepted that I was responsible for the war, and he was made to pay the huge war compensation, war indemnity for that, for the losses, for the losses which he, for the losses which he caused to the Allied powers. And it's estimated that Germany had to pay $6,600 million. $6,600 million she had to pay to the victorious powers. Okay, so this was the war guilt. All right. The second provision of this Treaty of Versailles was that Germany was made to accept that she will not increase the strength of its army. Not only increase, Germany had to decrease the strength of its army to a very large extent. Okay, Germany had to maintain only 1 lakh troops. Only 1 lakh troops. Germany will not possess any tank. It will not possess any armored vehicle. Okay, so its navy was highly reduced. Okay, so there would be no compulsory military training to the youth, to the population of Germany. So such kind of provisions were made, with the Germany. Then she would not possess any military aircraft or submarine. Okay, so such kind of provisions were made with the Germany under this Treaty of Versailles. So this was the second provision. Then she had to accept, she had to surrender its colonies in Africa and various other parts of the world. Whatever colonies she had to surrender those colonies. It is one of the provision of this Treaty of Versailles. Then Germany had to surrender a region known as Alsace and Lorraine. She had to surrender the Alsace and Lorraine, and it has to be given to the France. France claimed those areas, and this Alsace and Lorraine tension was already there between the France and Germany was always having its right upon this Alsace and Lorraine, which were on the other side claimed by the France, and this Alsace and Lorraine was given to the France under this Treaty of Versailles. Okay, then there was a port which was under the domination of Germany. That port was known as Port of Danzig. This Port of Danzig was taken away from the Germany, and it was internationalized. Furthermore, there was one canal that is known as Kiel Canal. Kiel Canal was an important canal which was important for the trade and commerce. This Kiel Canal was also taken away from the Germany, and it was also internationalized. So such were the provisions. Under this Treaty of Versailles. Furthermore, one more provision you can write down: the future alliance, any diplomatic treaty between Austria and Germany was also forbidden. Okay, it was also forbidden. So it is what this Treaty of Versailles, it provided. It greatly humiliated the Germany. It was a humiliating treaty for Germany, and later on, the Hitler capitalized on these provisions, that how the Germany was humiliated at the Paris, at the Versailles, and it was the philosophy of Nazism which he enunciated in the background of these provisions. Anyways, so this was what this Treaty of Treaty of Versailles provided. About this treaty of other treaty was this Treaty of Saint Germain. It was signed with Austria. So it also dismembered Austria. Austrian regions were taken away from the Austria. The areas which were the cornerstones of the Austria, which were the areas of strength for the Austria, those areas were taken away from the Austria and were distributed among the Allied powers. Similarly, Ottoman Empire, the Turkey, it was also made to sign the Treaty of Versailles, but later on, Mustafa Kemal Pasha of Turkey, it challenged that Treaty of Sevres. So those treaties are, I don't think that those are important for your exam. So this Treaty of Versailles, no doubt, is one of the important treaties which we have discussed. It's what the major decisions were made. Some important decisions were made at the Paris Peace Conference. So it's all you have to remember about this Treaty of Versailles, about this Paris Peace Conference. There is one more aspect, that is the mandate system. Mandate system. Okay, what is this mandate system? A brief introduction will be given. Mandate system. When the First World War was going on, the President of USA, Woodrow Wilson, gave his 14 points. These 14 points were given by him in January 1917, perhaps. January 1917, these 14 points. These 14 points were given by the Woodrow Wilson, which provided that some important navigation routes, they will be internationalized. They will not be controlled by any single power. It provided that secret diplomatic alliances that should be ended. It provided that Alsace and Lorraine should be given France. So these 14 points were given by Woodrow Wilson, and Germany or other powers, they were believing that the Paris Peace Conference is based upon these 14 points. Okay, it's based upon these 14 points. So Paris Peace Conference was influenced by these 14 points which were put forward by the President of USA. So what I am trying to say is that among these 14 points, one important point was that Woodrow Wilson proposed that a separate international organization will be established. That international organization will be the League of Nations. Okay. So this League of Nations will be set up, which will prevent any future war. Okay, this League of Nations. Sorry. This League of Nations was now set up, and under this League of Nations, a separate setup was established, which is known as a mandate system. What is this mandate system? Mandate system means that all the colonies which were previously under the control of the defeated powers, like Germany, or like Austria, those colonies, whether in Africa, whether in Middle East, those colonies will be given to the allied powers in trust. Okay, in trust. They will be given by the, they will be handed over to the League of Nations. So League of Nations will give those colonies of the defeated nations. They will give those colonies to any victorious power, to any allied power like France, like England, and they will keep those states, those non-European positions, those colonies in trust, and they will contribute. They will try to develop those colonies in a way that the self-democratic setup will be established in those countries. Okay, so when you are defeating a nation, when you are defeating Germany, so what will you do with the colony which was under the possession of Germany? So you will hand over those colonies to the victorious powers, and those victorious powers will rule over those colonies in such a way which will eventually develop the self-democratic institutions in that country. That is what's known as the mandate system. This mandate system was set up under the League of Nations. So in this way, France got, for example, Syria as a mandatory. Okay, as a mandatory. So similarly, England got various positions. England got Britain. Okay, Britain got Palestine. Okay, Britain got Palestine, Mesopotamia. Okay, then German East Africa. Cameroon was also given to the England under this mandate system. Okay, so this is very important for your understanding. Okay, then some parts were also given to the France as well. As I told you, France got Syria. Okay, France got Syria, and the part of and some colonies in Africa as well. Okay, so this is what was this mandate system, which is also important. So if you want to remember the Woodrow Wilson's 14 points, which he drafted, I told you January 1917. No, it is January 1918 when he gave these 14 points. So if you want to enumerate these 14 points, these are always available on the internet, and if you want to write down it here, So abolition of secret diplomacy was one among the 14 points. Abolition of secret diplomacy, as I told you. Probably a question may come. What were the Woodrow Wilson's 14 points? So you may write down in the mains. First is abolition of secret diplomacy. Free navigation at sea. Free navigation at sea for all the nations. For all the nations, whether in peace or in war. Okay, you have to give them the free navigation. Removal of economic barriers between the states. Removal of economic barriers. All round reduction of armaments. Hathiyar kam karo bhai. Reduction of armaments. All round reduction of armaments. It was the fourth point among the 14 points. So, colonial claims. One more point. Colonial claims will be settled in the interest of the population, which lived there. Colonial claims will be settled in such a way that the interest of the population will be taken care of at the time of settlement. Okay. Then evacuation from the Russian territory. Russian territory को खाली करना पड़ेगा. Okay. Evacuation of the Russian territory. Restoration of Belgium. Belgium will be formed as an independent state, independent nation. Restoration of Belgium. Alsace and Lorraine was to be given to the France. Alsace and Lorraine to the France. Important these provinces, which was always the cause of friction between Germany and France. So Bismarck's role in bringing this Alsace and Lorraine was also there. So these were taken away now again. Okay, Alsace and Lorraine. Now self-government for Austria and Hungary. Self-government for Austria and Hungary. Readjustment of Italian frontiers. Readjustment of Italian frontiers in a way which is the present, in a way which will, promote the interest, which will protect the interest of the Italy, because Italy had some tensions with its neighbors. So you have to readjust the Italian frontiers in the best interest of Italy. Okay. Then I told you about the self-government for the people of Austria-Hungary. Self-government for the people of Austria-Hungary. Serbia was to be given access to the sea. Serbia. The states which were previously under the rule of Ottoman Empire, they were to be given the self-rule. Okay, self-government for the non-Turkish people. You can write down this way. Self-government for the non-Turkish people previously living under the Ottoman Empire. Independent Poland will be created. So this was the 13th point, right? Now the 14th point will be League of Nations. League of Nations will be formed. It was not the word League of Nations which was created by Wilson. A general association of nations to preserve peace. A general association of nations to preserve peace, which later on became the League of Nations. Alright. So these were the Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. So with that, so we have done with these aspects of the First World War. Now we will take the consequences. So about the consequences, we have to divide its consequences of the First World War into three main parts. So in order to have the understanding, you always have to remember with great deftness causes and the consequences of any event. So we will deal up with the consequences. So it had the various consequences which will be divided into three main parts. First of all, we will take the economic consequences. Then we will take up the social consequences. Then lastly we will see what were its political consequences. Okay. write down the economic consequences first of all. Economic consequences. So economic consequences were money. Okay. The most important economic consequence was the loss for the economy altogether. Loss for the economy. So the estimate, it is very difficult to estimate the exact amount of losses which these nations suffered, at by virtue of their participation in the First World War. So the American Federal Reserve during those days that estimated that 35,000 million pounds, 35,000 million pounds were wasted in this First World War by all the nations which participated in the First World War. Okay, which participated in the First World War. Okay, by 1918. Okay, by 1918, the belligerent nations, the nations which participated in the First World War, they spent 35,000 million pounds in this war, and what it led to the increasing national debt for all those nations. And well, when it led to the increased national debt, so it now they wanted money in the form of loans. Okay, so in those situations, it was the USA which gave them the loans, and it acted as the creditor and supplier to these nations. So only USA got benefited by this First World War. All the other nations, they were engulfed in this debt trap. Okay, in this debt trap. So the European countries, they were now thrown into the misery because of the lack of wealth, and all the spending which was supposed to be meant on the educational sector, health sector, welfare sector, the funding upon those sectors that got highly reduced, and with that the economic health of a nation, it got suffered. So this is the economic loss. The first economic consequence is the economic loss which a nation suffered. The second consequence is the loss of manpower. I'm dealing with the economic consequences. You can write down the loss of manpower. Loss of manpower. I told you that loss of manpower is one of the greatest economic consequences, disastrous consequences of the First World War. At least 8 million people, 80 lakh people died in this First World War. Every country which participated in this war, lost its manpower. Germany lost the most of its manpower. More than 20 million, more than 2 million people died from the German side only. Not only Germany, in fact, if we will take the example of India, India also lost many of its population because India participated on the side of Great Britain. India was a colony of Great Britain, and 48,000 people died from India in that First World War. You might have seen that this India Gate at Delhi. So all the names which are written there, so those names are the persons who participated from the side of Great Britain, whether in Mesopotamia, whether in any other part of the world in this First World War. Okay, so greatest manpower loss was to the Germany, then Russia, France, Austria, Hungary. Every country lost its huge population. Okay, the average loss was 7,000 persons per day. Per day, 7,000 people died in this First World War. Such was the plight, such was the condition which followed, after this First World War. Then loss to the trade and commerce is also one of the great economic consequences. You can imagine what loss was it for the nation. This war is always dangerous, always cancerous, for the trade and commerce. So the international trade and commerce highly suffered. Okay, it no doubt somehow the indigenous, the small scale industries got benefited, because when an advanced developed country is sending you the product, machine made product. Okay, machine made product. For example, Indian industries got benefited by this First World War, because so far England was supplying goods to the India, but due to the participation of England in the First World War, the attention of English factories that got divided, that got diverted. They started producing other war materials, war requirements. So some small scale indigenous industries got benefited. Altogether the overall economic structure, altogether the overall industrial production, that highly got suffered. This international trade and commerce, it highly suffered due to this First World War. Then inflation. Okay, inflation, you can say the rising prices when you are spending, when you are not spending upon the welfare programs. Inflation, war debts, loss of property. Okay, loss of property was there. This is the economic consequence of the First World War. Then labor movements. Labor movements is also one of the important consequences of the First World War. Economic consequence, you must say. What is labor movements? When you are when you are recruiting the young population for the army, the population which was meant for the industries, that population is no more there now, and due to that factor, the people started demanding for their rights now. They started to demand for their rights, that we want better working conditions and all that. So those labor movements also got encouraged, which is one of the important consequences of this First World War. So these were the economic consequences. So as far as the social consequences are concerned, you can write down social consequences. You can write down one point, which is the social trauma. The entire generation of the Europe got swept away due to this First World War. I told you that how millions of people died. At that time, the population of Europe was not so much that, if the 8 million people are dying, so that means that the population of the European continent, it got highly reduced. With that thing, the entire generation of the Europe, the entire youth of the Europe, it got eliminated, and the memorials, war memorials, the discussions, the stories, novels were written, which created a kind of trauma in the minds of people. When the soldiers were coming back from the war fields with broken legs, with broken arms, with a kind of deep injuries, so that created a kind of trauma in the minds of the people. So it was a draconian situation for the people to see that how the humankind had not so far witnessed such kind of war. So this First World War was such a disastrous war for the humanity. So डर रहे थे लोग कि भाई जो है ये trauma से पूरा generation जो है that was suffering from this trauma, right? Then this social one more social consequence of this First World War is that it led to the change in the women's status. Our population got decreased. The male population got decreased. When the male population got decreased because they were now died, they got injured in the First World War, women came forward. They participated in the industrial production. They got forward for the employment, and it changed the status of the women. So you can say that it got the empowerment. Okay, it led to the empowerment. It had the influence. It had the important consequence for the population as well. When the population got decreased, various countries, they started to encourage the growth of the population. For example, France banned any kind of population control. Whether it was the contraceptives, whether it was the use of any other thing which controls the population, it was banned in France. So various countries now started to encourage the growth of population. Okay, so this was what is known as the social consequence of the First World War. Then it had the political consequences as well. What were those political consequences? It now paved the way for the USA to become the superpower in the world. Okay, so this First World War marked the end of the era of European supremacy. You can write down this way. Okay, it marked the end of an era of the European supremacy, and now the USA became the superpower. Okay, America became the superpower. Ottoman Empire, second political consequences. So Ottoman Empire, which was so far so powerful, which controlled at least half of the European continent, this Ottoman Empire got disintegrated, and it was concentrated now only up to a small area of the European continent, which is the present day Turkey. Okay, so this Ottoman Empire is no more there now. The Mustafa Kemal took Turkey towards the path of progress, and he made Turkey the secular nation after he withdrew from the Treaty of Service, which was imposed upon him by the Paris Peace Conference. And Now, one more political consequences: League of Nations came into existence. Okay, League of Nations, no doubt, League of Nations failure to prevent the Second World War. We will see the cause behind the Second World War. We will discuss that thing in that time. But this League of Nations had a role to play, in the future events. Its mandate system, League of Nations, what was the role played by the League of Nations, that we will discuss in the Second World War time. So at this moment, League of Nations, its creation is an important consequence of this First World War. Okay, then First World War, when we will discuss about the Second World War. First World War contained the seeds of Second World War. So First World War is itself responsible for the Second World War, because all the other consequences, the treaties which were signed at the Paris, whether the Treaty of Versailles, whether the Treaty of Saint Germain, so those treaties were not two-sided. Those treaties were one-sided. They humiliated the defeated nations, and that humiliation, it started the battle of egos. The ego was hurt, so that somehow that ego problem, that humiliation, that was capitalized by the Nazism. In fact, Mussolini, in case of Italy, he was also dissatisfied, although he fought on the side of victorious powers. But Italy had this thing in the mind that we were the victor, we gained the victory in the First World War, but we were not given our due share in that Paris Peace Conference. So that Benito Mussolini, that Nazism, those are Hitler, those are the creators, those are the products of the Paris Peace Conference. Those are the products of the First World War, and it is their dictatorship which paved the way for the Second World War. So this is all about the consequences, whether the economic, social, or the political consequences, which you have to remember for your exams. So with that, we have ended our First World War. Now we will be discussing in chronology about the Nazism, fascism. Then we will take the Great Depression. Okay, these are in the chronology, in the sequence. Then after that we will take the Second World War, right?